How to access the Emergency Response Data Platform. Any public safety agency can access life-saving emergency data through the RapidSOS Emergency Response Data Platform. There are two ways of doing so. RapidSOS Portal is a powerful web-based tool that enables you to manage emergencies and access location and supplemental data for every call in your jurisdiction. Signing up for RapidSOS Portal is easy and only takes a few minutes. In addition to emergency management tools and data, RapidSOS Portal includes a training platform as well as administrative tools to manage user permissions, track usage, and analyze trends in your agency. To learn more and sign up for RapidSOS Portal, please visit rapidsosportal.com. RapidSOS also integrates with every major CAD, CPE, mapping, or other public safety softwares. With an integration, you can receive RapidSOS data through your existing workflow, and you won't need any additional screens, tabs, or windows. To learn more about integrations, visit rapidsos.com/public-safety-partners.
All right. So we will officially get started. Welcome to week 5 of the 2024 Summer and Fall On Scene First ENP study group. Today, we're going to talk about radio communications. Like I said, it's going to be a rather quicker session. We're just going to be going over this one topic today. And I think next week, if time allows, I'm going to do a makeup session for last week. That is my goal. I cannot guarantee it, but it is my goal just to kind of do a makeup session. So you may randomly get an email into the Google group if that opportunity does present itself for me to cover one of the topics. I'll do that and then just send it out. It will be available just like as if we had a regular session. So but if the week goes any way like this week did, I might not get to it, and we'll still have plenty of time to get all of the topics covered. So if you have stumbled upon this video on my YouTube channel and it is before June 21st, 2024, you can still ask for or register for access to the live study group. It will end on June 21st. But if you want access to the Google group and the live study sessions that are on Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern, you can head on over to onscenefirst.com/training/study ENP. Go ahead and register there. If you are set to take the exam currently during this, actually, check that. I think today might have been the last day, or yesterday might have been the last day for the April exams. But if you are planning on taking the summer exam and you want to get a jump on the study materials, this study group will be good for the summer exam as well. However, if you want to get a jump on the study materials, you can head over to that same website there and request access to the previous live study group's materials, and you'll get access to all of the PDFs, the practice exams, the videos, the MP3s, and any other additional information that I provided in that previous study group. So there you go. I will be doing another live study session at some point in the foreseeable future. I just don't know what the dates are yet. I am going to consistently doing at least one a year. I was doing 2, but it's a little challenging with the way my schedule has been running lately. So at least 1, maybe 2. But if you want to get on the mailing list to see when the next live study group will go, just go over to onscenefirst.com. Right on the first page there, you can register. And even if you've already done the ENP thing, or you're going to take the test and you want to keep up with my shenanigans, go ahead and register for our newsletter. We have lots of great stuff that we put out from time to time. So check that out there. And we would not be able to do this study group the way that we do it without our premier study group sponsor, RapidSOS. They generously contribute to my ability to do this I don't know if you're aware the cost of a Zoom platform on the webinar side, but it is costly. And because of their generosity, I'm able to consistently provide our study group. And if you don't know who Rapid SOS is or what they're up to, you need to check it out. You shouldn't be in 911 and not have the Rapid SOS technology in your center. And we have scholarships that are available. The scholarships are for 911 telecommunicator folks, the folks that are in the ECC, that their agencies are not able to fund financially for them to take the ENP exam. And with that, we would not be able to provide these scholarships if it wasn't for Rapid SOS, Responder Services Consulting, or LB Comms. We have 5 scholarships to give away. They are due next week. So the submission date is April 26th. That is the last date to submit. They will be awarded on May 10th, and then you will have enough time to submit for the application. But before you submit, just make sure that your agency does not support you financially to take that exam, and just let your decision maker know that I will be emailing them to confirm that as well. So I appreciate that. And you can head over to onscenefirst.com/scholarship to submit for that scholarship. So with that, there are other scholarships that are available. I don't know the timing in which they provide their scholarships, but head on over to the Texas NINA page, Tina, Tennessee Nina, and 911 Wonder Woman. And I apologize, I know Alabama Nina also is giving away some scholarships. I think they recently just gave away their scholarships, but if you are from Alabama, get on their mailing. They give away scholarships as well. So lots of scholarships out there. Take advantage of them. So with that, let's get started on public safety radio communications. All right. I didn't do a ton with radios in my world, in my communication center. I just really talked on them. I had guys for that. The police side, they dealt with their police radio stuff. The fire and highway side, they dealt with their radio stuff. So it is my understanding that there is not a ton on the exam as far as the radio stuff goes, but I have covered what is on the body of knowledge and what is in your manual. And I've pointed out a couple of places where there's some stuff where there might be a little bit of a discrepancy. So just keep that in mind as well. But as far as basic radio communications go, LMR stands for Land Mobile Radio. And so in public safety, our LMRs systems, they must be licensed. You can't just jump up and grab a frequency and start talking on it. Each type of radio, whatever it is that you use radio for or radio frequency for, you need to have somebody assign you that frequency. And here in the United States, it is assigned and maintained by the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. And in Canada, it is the ISED, the Innovation, Science, and Economic Development folks. So they are the ones that license it in Canada. We are going to go a little bit further into these 3 categories, but just know that they are 3 very important pieces of radio. We have our radio waves, which are electromagnetic radiation that is used for communication. It carries information through the air. So just there's around me, there are lots of radio waves. Oh, I can't even begin to tell you the amount of things in this room alone that are sending off radio waves. And maybe that's why we have so many illnesses these days. I mean, go back in time, right? We weren't carrying around all these electronics with us everywhere we go, and we weren't so bloody connected at every turn. But either way, there are radio waves that are all over the place. The frequency of those, it refers to how fast those radio waves oscillate. And we're going to get into that in just a little bit. And then bands are the specific ranges of frequencies that are grouped for communication purposes or applications. So you can see that little image there. There's, according to the way that they are allocated, there's only so much space in each band. So they definitely have to be organized, maintained, and assigned. And I apologize for the changing colors that I am today. For some reason, the light above me is not flattering. Sometimes I'm green, sometimes I'm yellow, and sometimes, I have a bright orange shirt on, but I don't know if that's contributing to it. But yeah, there's that. So let's talk about radio waves. So radio waves themselves are electromagnetic waves that travel through the atmosphere as mentioned. It is actually, so when our voice is converted into electrical energy. The wavelength depends on the frequency generated by the radio system, so how it travels through the atmosphere. The lower the frequency, the greater the distance between the waves. And I'm going to give you a few Tracy-isms or Tracy's tips to be able to remember those. So the lower the frequency, the greater the distance between those waves. And the waves will travel in various distances. So just keep that in mind. We'll say first, think of radio waves as ripples in the water. And I'm going to come back to this in a few minutes with an analogy. So the longer the distance, the more strength you lose. So if you have a ripple in the water, the longer that ripple goes out, the less the ripple is effective, right? And then the longer the wave's distance must travel, the weaker the signal gets. So just like that wave, the ripple in the water, the longer it goes out, the weaker that signal or ripple will appear, right? Visually. You could also think of radio waves as long distance runners. The longer the distance, the more strength you lose. So on Monday here in Massachusetts, we had the Boston Marathon. Crazy. I know. I don't know who would run 26 plus miles. But the longer the distance that you run, the more strength that you're going to lose over time. Again, the longer the wave's distance must travel, the weaker the signal gets. So just keep that in mind. Then we have our radio frequency. The radio frequency is the number of radio waves per second. So how many times is there a wave of auscultation per second? So there's some that go really fast, and then there's some that go really slow. And so there are different frequencies. There's a spectrum of frequencies, and depending on what it is that we're using them for, as to where they're going to fit in on that frequency. So the radio frequency is a measurement representing the auscultation rate of the electromagnetic radiation spectrum or the electromagnetic radio waves. And the frequencies range from 300 gigahertz, which is the high end, to as low as 9 or even 3 kilohertz. And so we'll talk about hertz in just a second. The radio frequency refers to how fast the radio waves auscultate. Again, it'll make sense in a minute. The hertz is a measurement, a unit of measurement that is used to quantify frequency, specifically the frequency of periodic events or vibrations per second. So if you notice, all of these things are working off of each other for each other. So the radio waves are the initial message or the voice that is moving in space and time. The frequency is the time, and the hertz is the speed. And so if you think of Hertz rental car, how fast is the car driving, right? So the frequency is time. How often? Frequency, hertz, rental car, how fast, the speed at which the rental car is driving. So that can kind of help you remember which one is which. So kilohertz, we know what kilos are. I mean, the first thing I think of when I think of a kilo, I don't know why, is drugs. It just, I mean, some folks may think of something else, but that's where my brain goes. But the K, kilo, 1,000. Megahertz, I think of Mega Millions. So in Massachusetts, we have the Mega Millions in our lottery system. So for whatever reason, Mega Millions comes to mind, and that Mega Million, that's the next level up. And then hold on one second. I had someone doing something for me and it's still uploading. And then gigahertz, that is the big one. Gigantic. That's the biggest one. Gigantic. That's what I think of there. And it means 1 billion cycles per second. So as you're breaking these down, kilos, megahertz, gigahertz in that order. Okay. And then these are your classifications of frequencies. Now, I have no fancy way to help you remember these. But what I will tell you is that if you were to break these down, if you were to Google these, search these classifications of frequencies, everywhere on the internet, you're going to see that the very low frequency, the VLF, is going to start at 3 kilohertz. Our manual, for whatever reason, starts at 10. I have it listed in there. I don't know why. I don't know if it's a typo, but if you notice, most everything there is 3 to 30, 30 to 300, 300 to 3, 3 to 30. And then the manual has this 10. So if you happen to see a range on the exam, just know that the threes and the threes are pretty consistent through all of the ones that we see everywhere online. The 3 that you see highlighted there, low frequency, very high frequency, and ultra high frequency, those are the ones that we very specifically see in public safety. So if you had to spend time focusing on memorizing any of them, those are the 3 that I would focus in on. Okay. Just give me 1 second. I just have to take care of something that was supposed to be working that stopped working. Okay. So those are the ones that you definitely want to pay closer attention to. And then I'm going to break down, hold on. Okay. Then I'm going to break down VHF and UHF a little more specifically because they have it broken down in the book. They have it on the body of knowledge. And I just want you to understand how Tracy's brain works when it comes to remembering these. So I always look at the images. To me, the way my brain works is if I have an image with something and I can put an image to something, even if it's an opposite image. Now, I put that it looks opposite, and I'm going to explain why I think that it looks opposite. So I want you to take the VHF for a minute. The VHF, if you look at the way it looks, it actually looks like a U. And the UHF actually looks like a V. That's what I mean by it looks opposite. So if you're actually looking at the pattern, it looks opposite. So I know on the exam, you're not going to see a picture, but if you can picture the picture in your head, the UHF is going to actually look like V's, which are more kind of pronounced V's, right? So the UHF, where U's are a little softer, V's are more harder. Okay, so I'm going to start with that. This is a Tracyism. Remember that. Okay, and you can take it for what it's worth. And then I'll go to Derek in a second. So I'm going to finish my thought, and then I'll go to Derek. And if anybody has any other way to remember it, by all means. But when I visualize these things, it helps me remember them. So just the visualization of the image of what that frequency looks like helps me out. So then the criteria or the characteristic of the VHF is the waves are longer and they go a greater distance. So if you start off with, say everything's crunched up together, that wave is all crunched up together, a VHF, you're going to pull it out. So if you grab this end of it right here and you start to stretch it out, it's going to go much longer. So the wavelength is going to be much, much longer, right? And it's going to go. So we're going to have longer spaces in between, and it's going to go a longer distance. Okay? And then if you have the UHF, we're not going to pull it as far. It's going to stay higher in our pattern. So we're going to have higher wavelengths, but it's going to stay shorter. So we're not dragging it out, because if we were dragging it out, then we would have longer wavelengths and it would go a longer distance. And they would look like U's, but it would actually be VHF. And I know that probably doesn't make sense to some folks, but to people whose brain works the way that I do, it might make sense. So if I'm not looking at the screen, I can listen. I can visualize that if I think of VHF, the first thing I'm going to think of is that it is the opposite. So if it's VHF, it really looks like a U, which is a little softer, which is wider. So they're wider lengths, and it's stretched out, so they go much longer. So see how I did that? And then if I'm thinking of UHF, they look like V's, which makes them much higher wavelengths, and they're much closer, so they're shorter distances. See what I did there? It's just the way my brain works. So however it works for you. So Stephanie says she's thinking curly hair versus wavy hair. Yeah. And so wavy hair is going to be longer than curly hair. And yeah, I can get behind that also, right? Because curly hair it's curlier, and if you pull it down, right, it's going to be longer. Derek says old folks might remember VHF and UHF of the old dial TVs. The highest dial was UHF. Yeah, I wouldn't remember that, but I just know I would turn the dial. I don't really remember that, but however it is that you need to remember it, I hope what I just gave you help, because I do know that VHS and UHF is that should be VHF. I'm sorry. I just looked. It's VHS. It's supposed to be VHF. Apparently my mind was on Blockbuster when I created this slide. I will change that before I get it sent out. And then when you look at the way that the very high frequency VHF kind of moves moves through our atmosphere, I want you to think of it as kind of a flashlight. Again, go back to that kind of wide pattern. If you think of VHF as a wide pattern, you're going to get better coverage over uneven terrain and wooded areas. So on the next page, you're going to have that more concentrated beam of light, which is the UHF. Again, it's more condensed, very like a I don't want to say a direct beam of light, a concentrated beam of light. But the VHF is a V pattern. Okay, so the V, you make a V, and it's a wider pattern. You have those wider complexes there, and you have better coverage. If I was to shine this light into the woods, I'm going to see a much broader area. So I can see a much broader area, and that's good for that type of system. The only problem is it's subjected to atmospheric skip. So the broader the coverage, the more ability we can bring in atmospheric skip, especially in, bad weather days, etc. It's preferred by rural agencies as the VHF signals tend to produce better coverage on uneven terrain and wooded areas. So that makes sense. Again, that's why I kind of gave you that wooded area vibe. I also live in the woods, and we had this type of frequency. And in a slide or two, I'm going to give you another example. And again, maybe it has nothing to do with you living in the woods, but you remember Tracy talking about living in the woods, and we had a VHF frequency that was subjected, because I live in the woods, was subjected to that atmospheric skip. So VHF low band for public safety includes 39 to 72 megahertz band, now used mostly for intercity stuff. Channels in this frequency range, range travel greater distances than those of the higher frequencies. VHF high band for public safety is usually 150 to 170 megahertz. I don't think you're going to have to know these specifics, just know they're there. But again, much broader and spread out. So that beam of light off of that flashlight is broader and much more spread out, if that should be a question. Okay, so you see that V there. The ultra high frequency is usually our 400, 500, 700, 800, and 900 megahertz. It's also used by public safety every day. They may not communicate as far as low frequencies, but they do penetrate buildings better with portables. So they penetrate structures better. So think of that more concentrated kind of frequency. It's condensed. I kind of think of that as like, even though I'm using a flashlight analogy, it's kind of like a drill. It'll drill through those buildings. Easier to talk in the buildings on UHF. So take that for whatever it's worth there. So a Tracy tip to remember when it comes to frequencies is the lower the frequency, the distance between the waves is greater. Okay. So as a kid, you were lower to the ground and you could run much further. So the lower the frequency, the distance between the waves is greater. So lower to the ground, the further you could go. Again, it's just the way my brain works, because a lot of these things are just memorization and how to remember them. This is what I was referring to is back in the day, public safety made use of lower frequencies. Unfortunately, our VHF channel was subjected to atmospheric skip. So This was just one of the newspaper articles that I was actually able to stumble upon not that long ago. Rochester's new independent UHF frequency is 471.425, replacing its low band address of 3352, which it shared with other communities elsewhere, accounting for the feedback, also known as skip. Now, I don't think it was always from Texas, because I remember hearing folks going to the Piggly Wiggly for fire alarm activations or fire alarm activations. When we start moving to those higher frequencies, because they don't go as far, remember, the further they go, the weaker the signal, then we needed to incorporate repeaters. And with repeaters comes its challenges as well. So as we move to higher frequencies, we need to have repeaters, and repeaters are going to be just that. It's going to take the information and it's going to send it on a little bit further. Radio bands are small sections of radio communication spectrum where the FCC assigns the channels. So they're basically radio channels, and they are groups of frequencies. Each band has a band plan dictating how it will be used and how it will be shared. And so we have public safety, we have just radio in general, like when you listen to AM and FM radio, etc., television, etc. So how is it going to be used? And again, this is just a visualization to show you what the radio spectrums look like, where the frequencies are allocated. Some you have very large areas, some you have very small condensed areas. You're not going to be quizzed on those, but just so you have that visual. So here's Tracy's tip to figure out, kind of looking at the visual of the three different things. So first, we're going to go back to the ripples for the radio waves. Imagine the radio waves as ripples on a pond. We're throwing a rock into the pond and it's going to create the ripples. The waves are just that, the actual ripples that are created when the rock is thrown into the water. It is the action of it is what we are moving in time and space. So if we're talking on the radio, it's going to be our voices. So the waves are actually going to be the voice that is being moved from one place to another. The frequencies is the speed at which the pebble gets dropped in and the speed in which the ripples or the information that's moving is moved across that pond. And so think of it this way. If you drop the pebbles rapidly, you create more waves per second. So the higher the frequency means the more auscultations per second. So if I'm dropping pebbles very quickly, that means there are more ripples per second. So it's much faster. Okay. If I'm dropping them very slowly, then there are less ripples. And they're going to move very slowly. And then the bands are different parts or different areas of the pond with different types of ripples. And so the first type of ripples are little kids. When a little kid throws their pebble in, they're probably not throwing them in too fast. They're probably scattered all over the place. So there isn't a whole lot of consistency to them throwing it in the same place. The next place is you have your teenagers. Yeah, they're going to throw them pretty consistently. Maybe they're getting a little more accurate. They're getting a little bit faster. And then you have your adult. Your adult is going to throw much faster. It's going to go much further. And so the band is going to determine which part of the pond you're going to go to throw your rocks in. So There you go. So radio waves, frequencies, and bands. The ripples, how fast the ripples are moving, and where are you going to put the ripples. Another part of the radio section is signaling, analog and digital. Analog is basically uses the vibration of voice to send the voice transmission throughout the airwaves. Digital has to be encoded by either a voice coder or a vocoder. And it basically takes the voice and turns it into a digital signal. So there are two types of signaling in radio, as there is in data movement as well, analog and digital. Analog is like smooth, continuous speech, more cursive, like messy handwriting. It's pretty fluid. Digital is like clear, distinct codes or a neatly typed text. Digital signals are more precise and can often provide a clearer communication with less interference compared to analog. That's a given, right? Other types of radio systems that you need to be aware of is conventional versus trunking, etc. Conventional radios use dedicated channels that are manually selected. That means you must wait your turn to talk. In most places, like in our service here, we have a conventional radio system. Our fire department with EMS had one channel and one system. The police had another, highway had another. And if we were working an incident, we all had to wait our turn to talk on our respective radio channel. There's a limited in the number of channels that we are able to have. They are better for smaller agencies. And again, more common in rural areas. It's when we get into big cities, etc., we're going to look at a different type of system. So in this particular conventional, fire is using channel 1, ambulance is using channel 2, and police is using channel 3. Now, some places use conventional a little bit different, where they may have, like in our place, we have fire and EMS on the same channel. It's under one department. Some agencies may have two different police departments on one channel, but nonetheless, it's one specific channel, and you have to wait your turn to speak. As far as trunking, make sure you read the question on the exam. There are 2 sections in your manual and 2 sections on the body of knowledge and 2 sections as far as our study goes. There's trunking when it comes to phone and there's trunking when it comes to radio. Use caution and make sure you are reading the question as to how you're going to answer it. Okay. So as far as trunking goes, before 1996, it was relatively easy to get a frequency. With the advent of cellular devices and personal communication systems, the government began auctioning off frequencies to the highest bidder. There's only so much space on these frequencies. The auctions made billions for the federal government. They were the ones that owned the frequencies. They owned the space. They owned the real estate. So what trunking is a way of conserving that precious radio spectrum. It's basically putting a lot in a smaller area. The way that a trunked radio system worked is, well, think of it as computer-aided radio. Any agency can use any available channel. The control channel decides which one it's going to be using. So whichever, basically, if there's an incident, it gets assigned a channel, and then that channel becomes your channel. So when you turn your radio to that channel and you key your mic, you're going to that channel. Okay. A trunk system helps with the lack of frequency space since more devices use them. In a trunked radio system, all users share the radio frequencies. Some departments use what are called talk groups, which prevent interfering with each other. Usually, if you're in a small geographic location, you pop on over to a talk group and you don't have to get repeaters involved or anything like that. And you're just in this small geographic area, and the talk group will allow you to just kind of talk to the people that are within a certain earshot of that radio. Trunked radio systems are efficient use of the spectrum for two reasons. Number one, most conversations are short, and most people don't have to talk at the same time. Even though we think they do, or they think they do, we don't. And a lot of times there's overlap because sometimes folks can't hear each other. So there's that. So I'm going to show you what the trunked radio system looks like. So a conventional, I want you to think of kind of a bank, right? So if I go into a conventional bank, there are 3 tellers that are available. And I'm going to get in this line or this line or this line. And if I'm in this line, I have to go to this teller. If I'm in this line, I have to go to this teller. And if I'm in this line, I have to go to this teller. It's a little slow. And if this teller is slow, it could take me a while to get there. Just like if I was traveling on the back roads, another analogy. But on a trunked system, it is more effective. I get in line here, and then I just go to whichever teller is open as quickly as it opens, just like on the highway. If I'm stuck behind a slowpoke in the slow lane, I can move out from behind them when the traffic allows me to move out around them. So that's a way to think of the trunking system as far as radios go. Again, conventional trunking. Over here, I'm pretty much staying in my one lane, right? Over here, I can move accordingly. And then as far as our radios go, our types of radios that you need to know, our mobile radios, I would spend some time just reading through the definitions of the differences in the radios as to which is which. I'm not going to read through the definitions here. I think as a collective unit, we know what types of radios there are, but the definitions will be here. Mobile radios, knowing that the mobile radio is in our vehicles. However, also know that some agencies will use a mobile radio as their base station. So don't confuse that. Okay. But go through each one of these mobile radios, mostly in our vehicles, our portable radios. Your definitions and the information that you need is going to be here. I do not have any fancy Tracyisms here for the types of radios. As far as a repeater goes, the repeater allows a radio system to provide coverage over a greater distance. It allows portable and mobile users to hear other users a great distance away, usually 25 miles or more. It uses a base station and uses separate frequencies to transmit and receive. So if you've ever heard of a PL tone, they're different. So you have your frequency, but then there's a PL tone. So it's using one to transmit and one to receive. The radio receives or hears the base transmitter, basically repeating the transmission. And that's why it's really important not to clip yourself. That's why we like bigger words. And we try to teach our responders to hold the microphone down for a second or so before speaking, so we don't miss that information and it get lost in the repeater. Repeater systems can either be large powered base stations or smaller powered systems that are mounted in a vehicle. Most radio equipment, our mobile or portable radios, can be programmed with simplex channels that uses the base station to transmit the frequency. This is what I was referring to as the talk around channel. You don't need the repeater. The repeater plays a piece of it, but it allows you to just talk in a small geographic area. Simplex allows you to transmit and receive on the same frequency. It allows communication without using the repeater and can only communicate with those in the limited area. It's kind of like a walkie-talkie. So there you go. There are satellite radios out there. Again, you can kind of read through these. There's nothing really pressing that I would need to go over here. I would just suggest reading through these. And then the voting system receiver, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this. So voting receiver systems, on the other hand, are used in land-based radio communication networks, especially in scenarios involving multiple receivers and transmissions. These systems typically involve multiple receivers placed strategically across an area when the transmission is made. They're like mini repeaters. They help where areas are where we may have weak signals, there's a lot of interference, etc. So you can read through that. And then our simulcast systems, they refer to when we have the ability to broadcast the same program, the same message or content across multiple radio frequencies or stations. And it refers to them as transmitter sites, but the manual says frequencies. So I'm not sure which one is going to be correct there, but just know that there's a discrepancy in what the masses say versus what the manual says. And it allows for a robust, widespread system when necessary. And then the last thing you need to know is radio over internet protocol. This is very similar to voice over internet protocol, ROIP. It facilitates integrating traditional radio communication with modern IP-based networks, enabling a more flexible, efficient, and versatile communication solution. It's basically a computer-based radio system. Okay. There's an integration of radio and IP networks that it incorporates. There is gateway functionality, meaning now we've talked about gateways briefly. We're going to talk more about gateways. Whenever you talk about a gateway, it means that we can connect a legacy system to a internet-based network. So gateway functionality is allowing a ROIP device to talk to a legacy device through a gateway system. Having a ROIP network allows us to have extended reach and flexibility in who we're talking to and how far away we're talking to them. And there are other capabilities, being able to have talk groups and channels, text messaging on the device, having lots of other folks be able to kind of jump onto the channels that are on those devices. So eventually we're all going to be moving to everything over the internet or cloud-based. But in the meantime, these can be connected to legacy systems, and as we start rolling out that process. So with that, back to basics on the radio stuff. Not a ton of heavy lifting there today. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. There is the quick contact form if you should want to scan it. That'll send you right into my email, or you could email me. Go ahead and check out my social media. And down in the right-hand corner, there is a private Facebook group for first responders where we talk about mental health and wellness, check in on each other. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you, what you do. And until next time, heroes, stay safe, stay strong, stay here. We need you.